Being honest now.
No, but like, as someone who is a contrarian, right?
Yes.
I get a bit put off if too many people start like agreeing with me. Then I have to start going on the other side. So
I try to avoid that, actually. I really try to avoid that. That's a failure mode. That's like a Richard Hanania kind of behavior.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
You don't like. You're not a fan. Well, he's a bit of a. Wait,
I feel like.
No, I've had a run-in with him.
I feel like there's a word that may only be used in British English for Hanania. I'm not sure what it is.
Oh, go on.
It maybe
it's with a T and end with a T.
It might.
Oh, I love it.
There's a number of 4-letter words.
Yeah, but it's like, some insult that's only used at Eton and maybe Harrow,
And very good too. Talk to me about your relationship with Peter Thiel.
Oh, this is relentless now.
Oh, I haven't talked to him in many months. I mean,
How did it start?
Someone introduced us. How did it start? And someone introduced us, and someone was like, "Hey, I can, bring you to meet Peter." And we go to meet the great man, and he asked me a question about my curious neo-mercantilist economic theories. I had an absolutely lovely conversation this morning, by the way, with Lord Skidelsky of all people.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
What was that conversation about?
Economics.
Okay.
And he was surprisingly receptive to my strange ideas. And then he asked me, "What do you think the Bilderberg Group is?"
Oh, the conference.
Yeah. And I was like, and I happened to know that Peter himself was actually on the steering committee of Bilderberg. And so I gave what I believe to be the correct answer.
Which is?
It's nothing at all. It's just like private Davos. It's not where the secret destiny of the world is decided. It's just a thing. And then I was like, but...
Have you been?
I know. But I'm like, if you go back in the past, I think it has a somewhat different meaning in the 50s when it was created, because I think it was an intentional attempt to create a new European elite that was not tainted with any of the strange reactionary issues of the old European elite, and using Prince what's-his-face of the Netherlands as the kind of the front man was a way to kind of make that happen and smooth that transition. And that's what I think Bilderberg is. So I don't know if I was right or wrong.
So that was the start of the relationship.
Yeah.
What happened after that? Because he gave you money as well, didn't he? He's been supporting you. Never given you money?
No, he's never given me money. We've made a couple of actually business deals, but
Does that not count as money?
No, it counts as a legitimate business deal. And the thing is, actually, and this is important because actually the way Peter operates as a startup guy, it's like, or as a VC, like for someone like that, knowing him or being friends with him or whatever, that gives you what's called a warm intro. But everybody who has a warm intro is, when it comes to raise and pitch, everyone who has a warm intro is treated the same. And if you think about basically the existence of someone like Peter, you realize that that's the only way it could possibly work, right? And so there's no favoritism in a pitch. Right, and so when you're basically doing an investment pitch to Peter, you're doing an investment pitch, right? And
so what was your pitch to him?
I was selling my company,
Give it to me.
We're
journalist. My God, I've never.
It's called Reboot. We're replacing the internet. The internet is a very clunky system software stack that was designed in the 1970s. One of the consequences of this clunky software stack is that when we use cloud systems, we put our data on other people's servers where all sorts of interesting things happens to it. Actually, all of our data in the cloud should be on our own personal servers, but it doesn't work that way because everything is designed out like a mini computer from 1975. So it all needs to be redone from scratch, and I've spent 20 years doing that, and the result is called Urban. And you should invest in it. That's the pitch.
And he did. He invested in that?
He did.
He didn't give you money, but he invested.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I'm not sure what the difference is, but it sounds
Am I
good.
allowed to ask a question?
I think you're asking a much better one. Go for it.
Well, my question is like, so you said you haven't talked to him in a while. Do you think, because I think the narrative around you at the moment is like, all of like Trump 2.0 is based on like, is like your ideas, and like JD Vance follows you, and you're in with Peter Thiel and Andrew Eborn, and they're in,
It's much more complicated than that. And like basically, what the real relationship is essentially that a lot of the people, the younger staffers in the administration have read this stuff. And so the vibe floats around and the vibe basically gets everywhere. And, the sort of, the heartbreak of this situation is that the vibe is really not enough. And actually, tariffs, for example, are an essential part of a mercantilist policy, needed to reconstruct, America's economy. Reshoring is a problem on the scale of World War II. It's an immense and disastrous problem. And
it needs to happen.
And it needs to happen. And tariffs are certainly one tool in doing that. But it's like saying, to fix my car, I need a wrench. Okay, but it's true, to fix your car, you need a wrench. Sure. But like going and banging on the manifold with a wrench is not going to fix your car. The tool has to be used in an effective way. It's not just a vibe.
But tariffs as a tool is just a negotiating tool, isn't it?
It's not just a negotiating tool, because actually the purpose is to actually generate an environment where American investors basically create the capital that allows reshoring. So, it's great to have a vibe. All right, do something that convinces Mark Andreessen that investing in a company that makes screws for iPhones is a great killer winning investment that's going to 100x his money. Right? Figure out how to drive the investment that makes the creation of that capital real, and then I'll go and talk to you. But as a sort of TV show art of the deal thing, you're never going to get anything out of that, really. And
you've obviously written about your solutions to broader questions like monetary policy
yes.
and inflationary economics.
Yes.
You've never really written anything on tariffs that is so holistic.
I've written I'm not into tariffs, I'm into import certificates, basically, which is a slightly different version of the same thing.
Would you write something, as you've written about the overall solution to inflationary monetary policy, would you write something about tariffs?
Yeah, I need to, when I talked to Skidelsky today, Skidelsky was, surprisingly receptive to my strange Austro-mercantilist, economics, and he was just like, yeah, this needs to be all in one place in a book.
How would you do import substitution?
You basically want to, over time, you need a system of import certificates such that imports need to be paid with export dollars, and you need to ramp that ratio up over time so that in 10 years from now, it becomes essentially prohibitive to import manufactured goods from China, but it takes that amount of time, and so you want the tariff to make it prohibitive by the time you have the local. So that requires planning, that requires thinking, and if you look at these Asian countries that are doing basically, mercantilist policies, these are very, very detailed plans. It's actually not just a vibe, it's a tool. So if you're going to do statist economics, clearly we need statist economics. Libertarianism isn't doing the job, but you need to actually do it well, and you need to understand what you're frickin' doing there. Sure. It's not just a vibe.
Sure. Is JD Vance more than vibes? Like, have you spoken to Vance?
I have spoken to Vance.
And when did you last speak to him?
When did I last speak to him? Maybe a month ago.
What did you say?
What did I say? I said one or two things.
Was it in person?
I was in person. But yeah, actually it was pretty, I think we mostly talked about other things in politics, but,
What did you talk about then?
Culture, but yeah, the great thing about Vance is that he speaks the language of both major American tribes. He speaks the language of red state America, but he also knows what fork to use because he went to Yale Law School.
Yeah.
And so actually the way that the Trump administration has communicated with elite aristocratic America has largely been a ladder of fuck yous and boxers boasting before a fight or whatever.
Yeah.
it has not been terribly effective, and it has not been sort of looking for a win in a way. And I think that it is, causing the elites to circle the wagons and kind of restore their gumption by sort of treating them as all the same is a very different thing from saying, okay, I actually recognize that these elites have lost a lot of self-confidence. They really doubt themselves in a lot of different ways, and I'm going to go in and do things that are going to like split a wedge and cause them to basically fight with each other. Actually, in some ways, like my sort of, my bucket list moment in the last, couple of months was actually the fact this was utterly hilarious. So when I basically did this debate with Danielle Allen at Harvard, obviously the energy is coming from Danielle Allen, not from Harvard. Harvard is like, and Harvard, they sort of canceled us out of the first Harvard venue. And then Danielle Allen, I think this is how it went down, realized that as a Harvard professor, in fact, a university professor, of which there are like 12, she could use the Harvard faculty club. There's 12, 24, a university professor is a specific rank at Harvard. So, I mean, she ran for governor of Massachusetts, right? She's prominent. It's a top rank. And so, that made the debate very uninteresting because she's an academic politician and has to watch what she says. Right. And so, it's a little like when I can say just whatever the hell I want and she has to sort of speak in this political context, it's like we're having a martial arts fight, but I get to use, Thai kickboxing, whereas, she's restricted to yoga. But in any case, the bucket list moment was, Harvard was like, this is not an official Harvard event. You can't use the Harvard name. And then for like a day or two, they actually tried to keep the press out. Harvard tried to keep the New York Times and the Washington Post from exactly. Right. I was like, what? I was like, really? Do you think you can do that? They couldn't do that, but it was like that they tried was so sweet, and
Why did they try?
because they were just like, what's the upside? I don't know. What's the downside? Everything, right?
Were they scared? You think
they were concerned. They were just like, they didn't like it. That they platformed me, that they it just, everything was wrong about this event,
Do you think that a Vance administration would have... Do you think that a Vance administration would have much more success in forcing elites, or do you think that it would be too tainted?
I think that it could have more success, but it would have to do the right things. I think that basically, elites need to be courted in this very special kind of way that's very like courting a beautiful woman in a lot of ways, where basically, it's this sort of strange mix of you have to be sort of aggressive in exactly the right ways.
Is this your relationship advice?
This is my relation. This is the right relation. The public is a woman, right? And needs to be treated like that. And so, you can be seductive without being rapey,
exactly.
Right? And the difference
rapey,
between being seductive and rapey is a very particular difference. Actually, these things are very close to each other, but they are actually very, very different.
What's the key difference?
Who's the greatest rapist in the state?
Sorry?
Who's the greatest rapist in the state?
Who's the greatest rapist of the state?
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Well, Hitler, of course, comes to mind. But Hitler at least wanted to possess her. I think the ultimate in rapiness is it's a sort of drive-by thing. It's if we go back in time to historical English populists, there's of course Jack Cade, or as he's portrayed in Shakespeare, is very rapey. Jack Cade, very rapey populist. And sorry, Pinochet. But Pinochet is a little he's still there's still some dignity in Pinochet. Just the rapiness among conservatives gets worse and worse and kind of lower and lower, more and more Neanderthal brained, right? And, you know, there are elements of Trumpism which are genuinely kind of seductive, and there are elements that are very rapey.
What are those elements?
He has a tremendous self-confidence. His self-confidence is appealing, and like, you know, one of the things my first girlfriend, who somehow the New Yorker found and is somewhere here in England, you know, when and who was obediently slagged me off a little bit for the New Yorker. I'm like, come on, Meredith, really, do you have to, you know? But I owe her for that jacket. You know, I was just like, you know, talking to her and like, you know, asked, you know, really the fundamental and important question, you know, what do women find attractive?
What was the answer?
What is the answer?
What do we find attractive?
Yes.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you because you're a woman.
I mean, that's a very hard question. No, I don't want to be on camera.
The answer she gave, which is the correct answer, is self-confidence.
There you go.
And
But
like
that's true of both sexes, though, isn't
yes,
it?
yes, it is in different ways. I actually have kind of a female attraction pattern. This is part of what gave me my issues.
Avoidant women.
I'm attracted to self-confident women. You know, and I'm attracted to powerful women, and so Trump has a kind of self-confidence, but there's also an element of insecurity, and the insecurity is a huge turnoff.
Absolutely.
Huge turnoff. Like, bitches do not like
So
insecurity.
help me out with this question.
Yeah.
You mentioned Hitler. J.D. Vance mentioned Hitler when he called Trump the American Hitler. What's the real reason he changed his view?
I think that Vance, you know, I'm forgetting that line. But the thing is, Vance is the American Hitler, and that Trump was the American Hitler, and that Hitler united the two forces of authority and popularity, and then became an authoritarian populist. You know,
I don't think he meant it as a positive thing.
no, I don't think he did. But I think that basically the realization that of the perils and pitfalls, and yet the opportunity for and the necessity for authoritarian populism had not become clear to him. Because the alternative to authoritarian populism, which is a combination of two out of the three modes of power, authority and popularity, is the third mode of power, which is prestige and what we call meritocracy, or what, you know, Toby Young's father called meritocracy.
Yes.
Right? And
Lord Toby Young.
Is he Lord Young?
I'm all genuflect a bit.
Do you know this chap, Toby Young?
Absolutely.
I'll bet you do.
I know him.
Yes, and lovely. I've never met him. Lovely writing.
Really nice guy.
I'm sure. And so the problem is that meritocracy and prestige has a bug, in that, you know, it sort of told us it could solve the problem of who watches the watchdogs, and then it turned out that didn't actually work. And the place where we really found that out was gain of function research.
Here we go.
And so the problem is that the only cure for a bad meritocracy is the other two forces united is authoritarian populism. And authoritarian populism is a toxic drug. It's like chemotherapy, right? It's very like chemotherapy. Yes, it's needed in some form because there's nothing else that can solve this problem. This problem is only getting worse. And once you see the gain of function research, you see it everywhere. Expansion of NATO to the east, that's gain of function diplomacy, right? You know, it's pure gain of function diplomacy. There's no reason for it at all other than to basically cause the problem it pretends to be solving. And so the only cure for this is authoritarian populism, but authoritarian populism, we know, is a toxin, you know, and it's like Ozempic. I love Ozempic, you know.
You do? Do you use it?
I do. Well, I've moved actually about 25 pounds.
And does the Tattinger help?
What? No, it doesn't help. But, I've switched to a stronger, actually, what I buy is research peptides.
Oh, is that right?
I buy research peptides, so they're not meant for human or animal use. You have to check a little box, but they're much more inexpensive. And you can buy, not at all. And I've recently upgraded to terzepatide, Zepbound, which is the next step up. Now people are even doing experimental. There's a new one that's even better, retatrutide. You can order. It costs about $40.
Are you on commission?
No.
Would you like to be?
If I could mention the site where the problem is you can't talk about these sites in the media because actually you get shut down. It's called peptide.partners. Yeah. It's a friend of a friend.
Worry about, like, if you're friends with Mark and Andreessen, I'm surprised that you need to worry about cost. Do they?
No. These are people. No, number one, they don't fund me.
Really?
Have they invested in my? No, they don't do patronage. The tech right does not do patronage.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
I wanna hear this.
the tech right does not do patronage. And the reason the tech right does not do patronage is very, very simple, which is that they're not interested in power. Now, you might think, because you've been told constantly that these people are scheming for power, that they're interested in power. That is pure projection. Basically, the left imagines these billionaires as acting like left-wing billionaires. For example, Mackenzie Scott, Jeff Bezos' divorcee, who really deserves all the money she got because she was supporting him all through that period. So she deserves her money, whatever. But she basically dumps, huge buckets of $100 bills, off her yacht like every freaking day, right? That is not the way libertarian billionaires operate. It is not the way they think. And the reason why is that because they're libertarians, they don't believe in power.
Yeah.
They kind of can believe in it a little bit selectively in some ways.
What motivates them? What do they want?
So the comparison I would make is essentially, imagine you have a friend who's into wine. You probably have some friends. You're into wine. Somebody's into wine. You have a friend who's into wine. Tattinger, he knows, the difference between a good Bordeaux, a bad Bordeaux, maybe even the years, the vintages or whatever. And this guy's giving a tour of his wine cellar to another kind of individual who's also interested in wine. And this is an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And the alcoholic has certain questions which seem extremely logical and understandable to him, but which are very mystifying to the wine snob. They just don't understand it. For example, the alcoholic points out, what did this cost? Are you aware that it's 85% water? It's 85% water. This Tattinger, it's 88% water, right? Why are you paying all this money for water? You could just get a bunch of big jars of like Trader Joe's vodka of the gods,
Also
people are mainly water.
That's true. That's true. You can get Everclear, whatever. If you're really serious. The thing is, basically, to be a leftist is to want power in every cell of your body at all times, the way an alcoholic wants alcohol. Like, there are actually no ideas. The thing that really, drove that home for me, there were many things during COVID that drove it home. But you might remember that on February 1st, 2020, the way you were supposed to respond to COVID, according to the cathedral, was you were supposed to go to Chinatown and lick doorknobs. Have your flu vaccine because you should be worried about the flu. But like COVID is not a thing, and anyone who's worried about COVID, this is anti-Chinese hate. This is anti-AAPI hate, right? AAPI? Do you have AAPIs here?
No.
Asian American Pacific Islander. The word Asian means something completely different here, which is hilarious to me, right? And euphemisms, man. By March 1st,
We said Oriental, which is
Oriental, you can't say Oriental.
Explain the difference for the audience. Explain the difference.
Between Oriental and Asian. So Asian actually means, it almost literally means actually Mirpuri here, because it is not just that it meant Pakistani, but for some reason, the UK, which starts with a Y and ends with a Y, managed to get basically, frankly, the lowest, as all Pakistanis will tell you, the absolute lowest grade of Pakistani. They from Mirpur, which is the most backward area of Pakistan, right? And so if you look at like the demographics of Pakistanis in the U.S. versus the UK, million amounts of difference, and or if you look at basically the demographics of Hindus versus Pakistanis in the UK, enormous difference in outcomes because for some reason Indians in the UK come from a much higher like stratum, as do Indians in America. All right, back up. Where were we before that digression?
You were talking about J.D. Vance and how he changed from calling him...
On J.D. Vance and the question of
Yes.
seducing these, do you think that there is any basis for seducing these people on a national basis, or do you think it's inevitably going to have to be an international?
It was more than that.
I mean...
On the British right,
It's all of these things. It's like basically like, it's actually really easy to appeal to these people. It's really easy to, not the worst of them, not people like my New Yorker reporter, but there were many colleagues of hers at the New Yorker that could have done a very creditable job with that piece. That's just not what they wanted. It's all right. I collaborated with it for a reason. I knew what it was. I think my reasoning was correct. And they used a good picture, which took away half of the hits. Well, no, I actually realized why they used a good picture of me in the New Yorker. Somebody explained this. I'm like, why did they do this? I'm like, I know there were pictures taken in that photo shoot, which made me look like a complete retard. And they were and they were like, it's very simple. It's the photographer. The photographer on a commission like this wants a portfolio piece. The portfolio piece is not going to be a piece that makes the subject looks retarded.
No, the photographer does not choose. It's the photo editor.
The photographer chooses what photos. However,
David Romney would have had it say
the photographer chooses what photos they send to the photo editor.
Yeah.
So it's the photographer who does the initial censorship, and that can't be prevented. And so the photographer sent only good pictures of me to the New Yorker, and so they had to use one where I was at least in a funny-looking pose.
Theory.
Please. You as a journalist would know more.
Well, I just think that you look quite edgy and cool and like powerful in that picture, right?
Right.
And they didn't want it. They're selling you as someone
Who matters.
who matters.
Right.
Exactly. So
And-
if you look like a little dweeb,
Yeah.
that's not going to sell the piece very well. It was called autocracy now. That was the issue.
Yeah.
And they wanted to have someone who looked
Right.
like they could influence.
Right, and so
Do you
the
think
New
that's-
Yorker is sending a message to people that like I'm a dork and nobody should listen to me, but they're also sending a message that like I matter and it's okay to talk about me.
I
And
don't think they were doing the dork. I don't think they were doing the dork messaging. I think they were doing the like.
they're doing some of the dork messaging,
fine.
but it's like fine, I'm not gonna get butthurt about it.
But the dork messaging would have given a different picture, which is your
That's
point.
what I'm saying.
No,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
They would, and you were saying that yourself. So
Yeah.
if they sent the good pictures,
Yeah.
and the picture editor, as you say, would have a say, but the photographer has a say in terms of that.
Yeah, the
They could have
photographer has
portrayed
complete
you-
control because-
they could have portrayed you in whatever way they wanted.
Yeah.
That's what they chose.
Yeah.
Does JD Vance secretly still think the same thing about Trump?
No, I don't think so. I genuinely don't
Why?
think
Why
so.
did he
I
change
think
his
I
mind?
think that JD genuinely understands Trump's virtues, and I think that he genuinely understands, Trump is, is he in one sense a serial exaggerator, fabulist, and liar? Of course he is, but actually he is like a deeply sincere person, and the way
I think that.
and the way that those things are both true at the same time
I agree.
does not really come across in the press. I think JD is also a deeply sincere person, and I really think they see that in each other.
So why,
And-
going back to the central, why did he change his mind? Because he made all those public statements
because he
about
didn't know.
Trump. Okay.
Because he actually didn't know, and he didn't change. When you say change his mind, you talk about that like he changed his
Oh, no,
position.
well, he went
no,
from-
no.
he-
I
he
think
called
he
him
actually.
American
I
Hitler.
think he actually changed his mind.
Okay. He did change his mind.
And the thing is that when normally you look at these characters,
Yes.
they don't have a mind to change. change. They don't have anything, right? They're completely flexible people. And they've been sort of LARPing 18th century statesmen for quite a long time. Those were people who did have a mind. John Adams had a mind. John Adams had opinions. Thomas Jefferson even had a mind and had opinions, although, you know, he was more of a politician than most people think. But, like, you know...
But J.D. Vance, I feel like when you answer questions about whether Trump is the revolution, whether he's half a revolution, he's 1% revolution, whatever, you're being quite pragmatic. You're like, yeah, I can see what they're trying to do. Do you think that Vance has had a similar thing with Trump? He's like, listen, he's still not the guy, but like he's got a lot of charisma. He can do a lot that other people can't do.
Yeah, I would have. There's no way a person like me would have access to that information. You know, and one of the things when you talk a little bit.
Are you still holding court here?
Yes, I am.
Andrew is just going to film him all.
Yes, what is this?
Say your final.
All right. My final
one
piece.
thing. Then we're going to have our meal. And I tell you, one question I want to ask you.
Yes.
One final. There's a tart coming out. Let the tart come out.
I was looking for a completely different kind of tart.
I know you were. I'll give you the line. Very good. Very quickly then.
Yes.
In a nutshell, explain to people what the your whole philosophy is about sort of depositioning and so on and so forth and getting off that rebooting. In a nutshell, what would you say that is, and why should people believe
I
it?
would just say that in the words of Alexander Pope, for forms of government, let fools contest. Whatever governs best is best. And I think that we have a regime which is doing a terribly poor job. And I think government is one of the most important things in our experience as human beings. And even I have no idea how much better it could be.
Okay, thank you
All
very
right.
much. Brilliant.
Thank you so
Enjoy
much.
the rest of the barbecue.
Thank you so much.